Okay, Peter, I think we're ready to go. Thank you for agreeing to talk today. And yeah, so let me start.
Well, as always, it's a pleasure.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course. Thank you. So, Peter, I would like to talk to you today about the challenging state of the world, which, of course, wherever you are, feels more challenging than at any other time before. And I don't know if that is true, but what seems to be becoming more clear, I find at any rate, is that we are now at a point in the world, in society, where it's sort of increasingly clear that capitalism, at least in its current form, is sort of working less and less for many, many people. So we're having this, nearly absurd situation where, for example, energy companies are raking in massive profits, while many people can no longer pay the electric bills, right? And have to think about how do we survive the winter, even in the West. So what I'm interested in is what difference does sort of the inner money work that is one of your core teachings, what does that actually make when things happen on the outside that I have no influence on and that affect me in such a profound way?
Well, I can't pretend to have a real solution. I'll see how it feels. I'm here in Switzerland. They're discussing this like crazy. The largest, yesterday, the largest electricity supplier is receiving 4 billion from the government, while they're because they need to offer guarantees in the market, while they stand to make good profits in the future. And there's all sorts of public debate about this, and people are talking about turning the radiators down and doing all sorts of stuff to try and save energy and so forth. I mean, what's happening is actually moving in a sense in a good direction. But what we actually do individually, how we're going to manage, I wouldn't pretend to have an answer for all of us, or even myself yet, except that I believe, my deepest belief is that our individual consciousness is the key to individual solutions, to start off with individual solutions, which will come into the collective. Well, that's where my bet has been, love and consciousness, for the last 30 plus years, where I've been focusing my energy, and it looks like magic somehow, the solutions that occur, and synchronicities and stuff like that happens. Whether it's going to be sufficient for the energy crisis and all the crises we've got going on right now, and the uncertainties. I mean, in my life, and I'm now 75, I've never experienced such a series of concurrent uncertainties. And I doubt anybody alive has. So we're in a really, really strong, volatile, uncertain period at this moment, affecting all of us and affecting everything.
Yeah.
And
let me go back, Peter, to your point about how individual consciousness could become an entry point into potentially first individual solutions, but then eventually also collective solutions, right? And I want to bring an example which is sort of the opposite of what can happen when people drop into unconsciousness. I recently read this article in The Guardian about these super rich preppers who are designing these mega bunkers with, hopefully self-sustaining farms. And, it's crazy what they're building. And one of their biggest concerns is, how do we keep the people that are now designing our security systems from actually overtaking the bunker when the apocalypse is happening and we need to retreat in these bunkers? And I wonder if you have any thoughts around, can their money protect them in an event of a systemic collapse? Is that a mindset that works?
My questioning around that is, what's the quality of life, and what's the quality of life for these billionaires with these concerns right now? I mean, they're spending all their time and their focus somewhere, I imagine in the desert somewhere, in air conditioning, worrying about their future. If you can afford that sort of money, you can probably build that stuff. But is it, does it create a happy life? I mean, that's really the question.
So, but in a way, one could also say, I think that these preppers, if I look at it compassionately, have actually fallen prey to a mindset that we've all been socialized into, which is this belief that, if I only have enough money, then I can create all the safety and security and also creature comforts that I will ever want. Right. And they've taken it to an extreme where now actually they're beginning to realize, I don't know how conscious it yet is, that the more money they throw at this is probably not going to fix the problem, because even with their security personnel, what is money worth when the system collapses? Like, nobody wants their money anymore. When money is worthless, then what's the point, right? So then they're back at the question of, how do they build relationships? How can they be in contact with other people in a different way? But so if that's the the old mindset, which you called the normal regime, right? We work, we make money so that one day we are secure, and maybe we're even free to then finally do what we want. You actually propagate a different model, a different way to live life. Could you say something about that?
Yeah, I mean, this has been the basis of my work from the start. It's turning that on its head and starting by asking yourself, bottom line, why am I here really? What was the purpose of my being on this planet to start off with? And getting in touch with one's, what I call source, to manifest the purpose or the masterpiece of one's life here. And if my own experience, but the experience I've had of other people who move in that direction, and I consider you one of them, Nadja, is that actually that's the source of your basic happiness. And doing what you love in life, loving what you're doing, doing what you love in life. And if you do that, if you're capable of doing more and more and more of that, you're not focused on these fears really, because you're going to die at some point anyway. So if you assume you're going to die anyway, the best thing you can do is to live as happily as possible. And as I think I said in the previous interview once with you, if you can do that, I think you'll die happily too. But if you're living, a life of suffering without any meaning in your life, and you haven't discovered that, you'll probably die suffering too.
And what I hear you say, Peter, is that instead of living in this normal regime where we work to make money, to feel secure, to feel free, there's actually something that you in essence called the normal regime, or the more normal mindset of going about life, which would be to come back to a place where we connect to our source, where we understand what it is that our purpose, how we define our purpose, right? How we feel our purpose, and start from that place. Now, I know that this kind of a world sounds very magical to many people because it's so far removed from their actual experience. But let's work with this as a thought experiment for a moment. And let's just say we had a life in which the normal regime was replaced by a more natural way of being in the world, the natural regime. In this natural regime, things would change, right? So everything would no longer be just profit and growth related. There would be de facto no longer any artificial markets. How would our economy change if we moved into this natural regime?
Well, if you go to if you think through, as I have done, to the extreme, which is really what you're asking, you wouldn't, and it is an extreme, and it's an illusion at the moment, there wouldn't be any money. There wouldn't even need to be any money, because you'd be so tuned in to yourself and to the collective that you would be doing what you love. And at the moment you, for example, produced a product or a service, somebody would be there who would actually be needing it. because we would all be so interconnected. Um, and so that would actually do away with even the need for money. But we're nowhere near that yet. But if you look at it from that context, money is just a surrogate, and the market is just a surrogate to fill in until we have that level of connectedness and consciousness together. So what one needs to be clear about is that the system we're using right now, which I call the basis for the normal regime, was only created 350 years ago. And actually the underlying motivation for it is fear. So, you know, it was used, the fear was used actually, I think, very consciously to bring people into the factories on a linear, to create linear line production and material products. Now, as we moved, our needs moved from material products. If you ask people now, we have sufficiency, at least in the West, of material products. But the needs changed to immaterial things, and we're using the same system, which doesn't work. You know, working hard to earn money, to try and get peace and security and the things you mentioned before, that doesn't work. But what does, so what people are, they follow what I call the natural regime, and it does feel like magic, but you can ask anybody who's started up a new business, and you'll find out that they all start with a vision, with passion behind the vision, and they can tell story after story of the magic that occurs when they've got passion behind their vision. People show up that they hadn't planned. The resources arrive. It's easy to get the bank credit.
So Peter, speaking of startups and maybe organizations in general, then in this more natural regime, right, where people are driven by their vision and by their purpose, what would organizations even look like?
Well, completely different to today. I'm thinking now, I'm talking about largish, medium-sized or largish organizations, which are built for industrial production on the model of a pyramid. So, you know, with an organigram, a pyramidal organigram. So this pyramidal organigram was wonderful for linear production. And we need to be very grateful for our recent ancestors for all the you know, material products that we all enjoy today, every day, including, you know, technology, solar panels, computers, but back to the railway engine. You know, we all take these things for granted almost now, but they are the products of that system. But the natural system, which we're moving into, and people are trying to, you know, advanced coaches are trying to flatten hierarchies and doing stuff like that. If you look at nature, nature is working on a cellular basis, fractal and cellular basis. And the most advanced organizations or companies, enterprises that I know are starting to move into that as a kind of model. It's a massive change, and only a few are really doing it or making it. But the ones I know have cells, are creating cells, autonomous cells, maximum 25 to 35 people in a cell, and not allowing them to grow bigger than that. So if you imagine, you know, some of the largest organizations, now the question is, can they change sufficiently to adapt from the present structure into such a structure? Of course, it's easier for a startup to go from scratch, but I believe this is going to be the eventual challenge, because I think these larger monoliths are going to break down, or already are breaking down, and won't be adaptive enough to innovative or creative enough to be autonomous enough to create the solutions that are really potentially, if anything, capable of answering the big questions of today. Mm-hmm. To give them their credit, they still are providing us. So it has to do with collective consciousness now. And they can't stop being pyramids until you know, consciousness raises generally.
So there needs to be, in a way, even though the word fragmentation is, has a slight negative connotation, but it sounds like these massive entities need to be splintered up or are splintering up in ways that become more meaningful, smaller units that then need to find a way to work together. But in the current state we're still in, what do you feel is the role of organizations today? Where can they be part of a solution or help people move towards possible solutions?
So it's why I'm hesitating. I'm hesitating with the word organization because I see organization. We have a tendency to give organization and companies an idea that they exist like people, and that Nestle is a person, and Novartis is a person, and you move over to the United States, and you have Coca-Cola is a person, and that legally they are treated as persons, these organizations, and my belief is that if you treat them like that, they are like phantoms. So if you ask what can an organization do, what I look at is who is actually running the organization. The person I call Source, I've named Source, no matter the size of the organization. And the question would be, what can that person do? What kind of influence is that person holding? And there, I believe, if there is a conscious source, those individuals can do a lot with the people that they are influencing. And I'm talking not just about the people, say, collectively within what you'd call an organization, the employees, for example, but in terms of the relationship to the customers, relationship to government, relationship to the whole collective. And this is why I hesitated, this is a whole different lens of looking at what's going on in terms of collectivity, which I think is more meaningful than trying to ask, well, what can Nestle do in the world? And then they will become a B Corp and follow ESG principles and try to do impact.
And Peter, but then let me ask,
move beyond.
Because we can't always reach the source, right? And it's sadly not always the case that the source of especially these big organizations is possibly the most conscious person in the organization. So for me, then another question would be, what can everybody who is working currently in an organization do? And how can they maneuver in this world, even if their source is maybe not creating the kind of environment that they aspire to have?
Okay, so so you can still do your inner work. And the point is that if you are rising in consciousness more than the person, let's say, you're reporting to, you will find that too limiting. And what you will find yourself wanting to do is either develop the whole system, which could be your enterprise or organization, or you will need to jump out of it to be able to spread your wings and start to continue to realize yourself and create a new enterprise which is more related to what you love doing, and ultimately to why you're here. So the bottom line for me, and I'm happy to find that more and more people are understanding this, has always been for a long time, love and consciousness, and I think I that's a better, bigger bottom line than money. So money tends to be the bottom line, and that's a trap. In other words, money isn't the bottom line while things are so-called going well and the enterprise is profitable. But you see where the real bottom line is when the enterprise is less profitable, then everybody jumps on into the money. And that's the real challenge, to remain focused on the bottom line of love and consciousness when maybe things are traditionally not so going so well. Like right now, is a good example.
So, Peter, maybe to close this off, because we need to wrap.
Yeah, I know.
I know there's so much more
going
to
in all sorts of directions.
So for you, given that things are not going so well, and you yourself said this is the most volatile times that you've been witnessing in your, not insignificantly long life, where do you continue to take your optimism from?
Well, I don't know if I'm so optimistic. I'm accused of being optimistic sometimes. But actually, I do look at all the pessimism. I look at the seriousness of the issues that we're facing. But I try to live what I've been talking about. In other words, to look at, well, what am I here for? What do I want to do next? And I find that while I'm in touch with my own vision and my own next steps, I get resourced. My energy comes from that. It doesn't come from anything else, actually. So I'm being 75 and going for 8 days of engagements on the trot. If I didn't have that energy, I wouldn't be able to. If I didn't have that, I wouldn't be able to do that. So that would be my recommendation, or at least from my personal experience for anybody. Just find out what your personal vision is and just stay focused on that. And the next steps, which don't have to be big ones, they're very often trivial ones.
Peter, thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
It's been a great inspiration to be around your soul's energy and your vision. Thank you.
Thank you.